The top stories tonight in Y News. Health authorities say that the transmission of COVID-19 in the country is slower now. Even the mortality doubling time has improved. And these are good indications that the government's health measures designed to combat COVID-19 have been effective, according to the health department.
Kita natin nag-i-improve yung ating mga indices or indicators. And this can very well reflect yung response naman na ginagawa natin, that we are really aggressively trying to contain the transmission in our communities.
The newly installed PhilHealth chief asked the public to support his leadership instead of criticizing his capability. Also, he is in favor of the proposal to grant President Rodrigo Duterte emergency powers to fix the problems in the agency. And as for the filing of charges against Health Secretary Francisco Duque III and several PhilHealth officials, he says that he cannot stop evidence.
I cannot stop evidence. It's beyond my discretion. What matters most is ano po ang sinabi ng ebidensya. Yun na po. So hindi natin tinitingnan ng tao.
Despite the implementation of community quarantine due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the employment rate in the country is gradually recovering, and concerned government agencies expect the unemployment rate to further descend by the following year. National Economic and Development Authority Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua anticipates even more improved employment next year.
If we achieve all these, we will see 2.4 to 2.8 million additional employment next year. That will allow us to lower further our unemployment rate to around 6 to 8% by next year.
The Interagency Task Force finally launches its contact tracing application that can be used by business establishments in the country.
The Australian government is preparing an emergency rescue plan in the wake of the country's first recession in 3 decades, with massive tax cuts on the cards.
And a sand artist in India reminds everyone to wear a mask and properly.
Good evening, Philippines and the world. Today is Thursday, September 3, 2020. I am Harleen Delgado. Join us in the next hour as we deliver today's top stories around the country and in other parts of the world.
We are also seen in 1,935 satellite monitoring centers nationwide and via live streaming worldwide with the UNTV News and Rescue social media accounts and our website, untvweb.com. I am William Theo.
Health authorities say that the transmission of COVID-19 is slower now. Our health correspondent, Aiko Miguel, explains why.
It takes more than a week before cases double in the Philippines, according to the Health Department. According to Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere, this means that the transmission of COVID-19 is slower starting last August.
So as of August 31, ang ating case doubling time ay 10.08 days. This means that it takes 10 days ngayon, as of August 31, para magdoble ang kaso dito sa ating bansa. The longer the case doubling time, the slower the spread of the infection or transmission, and this is better for us.
Even the mortality doubling time in the country has improved, she said, which now takes almost 15 days.
It is the number of days it takes for the number of deaths to double. So, longer mortality doubling time, mas good yon sa atin. So, our mortality doubling time has improved from 0.96 days in March to 8.29 in June. And now we have 14.67 days.
The DOH reports these are indications that the health measures the government implements to fight COVID-19 has been effective.
Nakikita natin nag-i-improve yung ating mga indices or indicators. And this can very well reflect yung response naman na ginagawa natin, that we are really aggressively trying to contain the transmission in our communities.
Undersecretary Vergere also underscores that the reproduction number of COVID-19 transmission in the country has also gone down to 0.977 days. This means that every single infected person can infect only one individual, while in March, one active case infected almost 2 other persons. Also, the DOH says the country recorded today the lowest number of single-day cases since July 29. Usually, the average number of recorded cases daily is more than 5,000. The DOH reminds the public that although these reports show good indications, there is still no room for complacency. Everyone must play his part in the battle and be responsible for his own and others' safety, especially now that quarantine measures in most parts of the country has been eased and more people are allowed outdoors. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Meanwhile, the recruitment of volunteers has begun for the clinical trial of Lagundi as a supplemental treatment for individuals with COVID-19. Meanwhile, the DOST will extend the clinical trial for virgin coconut oil to Valenzuela City. Vincent Arboleda tells us why.
The Department of Science and Technology, or DOST, wants to use Lagundi in treating COVID-19 symptoms like fever, cough, and sore throat. With the approval from the Food and Drug Administration, the recruitment of volunteers has started for the clinical trial of Lagundi as a supplemental treatment for individuals infected with COVID-19. During the program Get It Straight with Daniel Razon, DOST Secretary Fortunato de la Peña stated that they have allotted a 4.9 million peso budget for the clinical trial, where 200 volunteers will participate. Lagundi will be given to mild cases of COVID-19. Experts will also check if Lagundi can prevent the worsening of the deadly respiratory disease. Led by personnel from the Philippine General Hospital, or PGH, the clinical trial of Lagundi will be conducted at the Quezon City Institute Quarantine Center, Santa Ana Hospital, and the PNP NCR Community Quarantine Center. Meanwhile, the clinical trial for virgin coconut oil, said to have antiviral properties, continues. Secretary de la Peña said they already have 40 volunteers participating in the VCO clinical trial. They need only 16 more to complete the 56 volunteers needed.
I-extend na lang namin yung trials sa Valenzuela Emergency Medical Center. Nasa ganun ay mas dumami pa yung ating volunteers na pagpapasihan. So, nagit kumulang siguro, baka within 2 months ay magkaroon na tayo ng magandang analysis tungkol dito sa VCO.
Results from the in vitro trials show that VCO have a modest reduction on the infectivity of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. For the herbal medicine Tawa-Tawa, De La Peña said that they are still waiting for the FDA approval for them to start its clinical trial as another supplemental treatment.
Lahat naman ng ating mga natural products na ginagamit sa clinical trials ay nagdaan muna sa toxicity at harmful effects testing.
Vincent Arboleda, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
Butuan City needs more than 150 police personnel to monitor control points in barangays Ambago and Holy Redeemer, which have recorded high numbers of COVID-19 cases. But several policemen from the city police office have tested positive for COVID-19, hence the lack of uniformed personnel. Now, Butuan City Mayor Ronnie Lagnada has sought help from the Philippine Army. 24 Army personnel are needed in Barangay Ambago with 12 control points, while Barangay Holy Redeemer needs 12 soldiers to monitor 6 control points.
Mga areas na yan is kinokontrol lang yung movement ng tao. Tapos kung wala kang quarantine pass, hindi ka pwede papasok.
Sa tingin ko, hindi sila takot na nandiyan ang army. Mas masaya sila dahil alam nila na magkakaroon ng mas maigting na pagdisiplina at maigting na pag-implementar ng guidelines protocols sa COVID-19 in support sa ating mga kapulisan dito sa Butuan City.
Butuan City has more than 200 confirmed cases as of today.
Malacan respects but regrets Malaysia's entry ban against the Philippines. Starting September 7, Malaysia will prohibit the entry of long-term immigration pass holders from the Philippines as well as from India and Indonesia. Malaysia's move aims to prevent an increase in the number of imported coronavirus cases. Long-term pass holders include permanent resident expatriates, students, and people with spouse visas and participants of Malaysia's My Second Home program.
Well, that's a sovereign decision, no? Who will be allowed to enter one's territory, no? I'm not saying we're happy. I'm saying we regret the decision, but we respect the sovereign decision of Malaysia.
The newly installed PhilHealth chief asks the public to support his leadership instead of criticizing his capability. Also, he is in favor of the proposal to grant President Rodrigo Duterte emergency powers to fix the problems in the agency. One of our senior correspondents, Joan Nano, will join us tonight to tell us why live. Yes, Joan?
Arlene, newly appointed PhilHealth President and CEO Dante Guieran is determined to eradicate the alleged corruption in the agency under his leadership. This is despite criticisms and doubts on his capability to lead the state insurer amid corruption controversies. Guieran admits he does not have much knowledge concerning public health, but he assures the public that he is very much willing to learn. He is even planning to consult experts in order to manage PhilHealth the best way he can. Here's what he said about criticisms hounding his leadership early on.
Hayaan nyo sila, yung nagko-comment. It's their right. I admit, ano bang alam ko sa public health? Of course, aaralin ko yan. Naku po, aaralin ko yan. Hindi ko alam eh. Alangan ang sasabihin ko na alam ko na hindi ko alam. I have to talk to experts.
Attorney Guieran also appeals to the public to support his leadership instead of criticizing his capability. Guieran will push for reforms in PhilHealth in order to eliminate corruption in the agency. He will also work on bringing back the Filipinos' trust in the country's public health insurer.
Sa lahat nating mga kaibigan, sa mga Pilipino, bigyan niyo ako ng chance. No? Bago ako, give me a chance. No? Let us not prejudge anybody. Much more ako po. Magtulungan tayo. Isang tabi natin yung politika. 2 years pa eh. Pambihira naman kayo.
Arlene?
Joan, lawmakers in the lower house of Congress proposed to grant emergency powers to President Rodrigo Duterte to resolve the problems in PhilHealth. What is Attorney Guieran's comment on this?
Yes, Arlene, the new PhilHealth president supports that proposal of lawmakers in the House of Representatives. As of now, Guieran is waiting for the possible reshuffle of PhilHealth's key officials in accordance with President Duterte's order. The official also vows to focus on resolving fraud claims in PhilHealth. Guieran also made an assurance that he will not stop any possible filing of charges against Health Secretary Francisco Duque III and former PhilHealth Chief Ricardo Morales if there is evidence which prove their involvement in corruption and irregularities. He says that he cannot stop evidence and what matters is what the evidence tells. Arlene?
Thank you so much, Joan Nano, for that report.
Malacan welcomes the proposal of the House of Representatives to grant President Rodrigo Duterte emergency powers to fix the problems of corruption in the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, or PhilHealth. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque thanks the allies in the Congress for their willingness to help the president in solving the issues in the agency. However, Secretary Roque refuses to provide more details on this issue since the palace official has no idea on the scope of emergency powers proposal.
Well, we welcome the willingness of the House of Representatives to give such emergency powers to the President. Pero hindi po ako makakomento kasi hindi ko pa nakikita kung ano talaga yung rekomendasyon ng mababang kapulungan.
Meanwhile, in the upper chamber, some senators are against the proposal of some congressmen to grant emergency powers to President Rodrigo Duterte to clean and solve the problems of PhilHealth. According to Senate Minority Leader Franklin Drilon, the president has enough authority to reform and reorganize PhilHealth without emergency powers from Congress. Drilon says the president has vast power under the Constitution and existing laws, including Republic Act 10149, which allows the president to reform government-owned and controlled corporations or GOCCs like PhilHealth. He adds the president has the power to order the suspension or transfer of personnel in the entire executive department. According to Drilon, they will oppose the proposal in the Senate. Even Senate President Vicente Soto III expresses the same sentiment. In a television interview, the Senate leader said he believes the President of the Philippines is considered the most powerful president in the region, adding that the chief executive can do anything they want him to do now, even without emergency powers. And for Senator Kiko Pangilinan, the granting of emergency powers is not the solution, but the removal of Health Secretary Francisco Duque III from office and the filing of cases against those behind the alleged overpricing of test kits and the mafia inside the agency.
Meanwhile, the country's Department of Health, or DOH, says that nearly 2,000 new cases were reported today based on tests done by 91 out of 113 laboratories. That's less than yesterday's reported additional cases. The National Capital Region records a number of additional cases lower than its previous daily case counts, with only 818 today. Cavite, Laguna, and Negros Occidental joined the NCR in reporting the most new cases, each having more than 100, while Rizal logs today the fifth highest additional confirmed cases with 78. Now, the cumulative cases of coronavirus infection in the Philippines surpass 228,000. The number of active cases increased to 65,240. Of those active cases, 90.8% are in mild condition. We have lost 65 more patients, but through our fervent prayers, medical interventions, and sacrifices of our medical frontliners, 880 more people have won their battle against the invisible enemy. That brings the total recoveries nationwide to nearly 160,000. Thanks be to God.
Let's now take a closer look at the updated count of coronavirus cases around the world. The COVID-19 pandemic has now reached a total of more than 26 million confirmed cases in 188 countries, regions, and sovereignty. That's after close to 246,000 confirmed cases were added in various countries. The Americas remains as the region worst hit by the pandemic, with almost half of the total global case count, or almost 13.5 million. The fast-spreading disease has claimed more than 863,000 lives. That's up by over 4,000 new death cases from yesterday, while nearly 17.3 billion patients across the globe have recovered from the new coronavirus infection. Thanks be to God.
Despite the implementation of community quarantine due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the employment rate in the country is gradually recovering. Concerned government agencies expect the unemployment rate to further descend by the following year. Asher Kadapan Jr. details why.
The employment rate in the country is gradually recovering despite the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the country's economy. Based on the labor force survey conducted by the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA, in July, 41.3 million Filipinos were either employed or engaged in a business. The employment rate increased after 7.5 million Filipinos were employed during the General Community Quarantine, or GCQ, and the Modified GCQ periods, although this rate is still lower than that in July 2019.
yung pagbaba ng unemployment rate, 10% din ng July mula dun sa 17% noong April. Of course, may mga regions tayo na nakita na nagbukas na yung mga economic centers. Kaya nagkaroon na ng pagbalik sa trabaho yung ating mga kababayan. Ano?
Based on the survey, employment in major occupations increased. The mining and quarrying sector recorded the highest increase in July 2020, followed by agriculture and forestry. Despite the progress, the unemployment rate in some regions increased, particularly in the National Capital Region, which was primarily affected by the implementation of community quarantines. Almost 1 million residents in Metro Manila are currently unemployed, according to PSA. The major occupations that have the largest drop in employment are the sectors of arts, entertainment and recreation, accommodation and food service activities, information and communication, fishing and aquaculture, and professionals, scientific and technical activities. The Department of Labor and Employment expects improvement in the coming months with the easing of quarantine restrictions, the government's implementation of the Prevent, Detect, Isolate, Treat, and Recovery strategy, and a safe and sufficient public transport for business operations. National Economic and Development Authority Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua anticipates even more improved employment next year with the public's cooperation on all the measures imposed by the government.
If we achieve all these, we will see 2.4 to 2.8 million additional employment next year. That will allow us to lower further our unemployment rate to around 6 to 8% by next year.
Asher Kadapan Jr., UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Interagency Task Force finally launches its contact tracing application that can be used by business establishments. And there is no need to disregard the applications already being used by local government units. Vincent Arboleda will tell us why.
The Interagency Task Force has launched its contact tracing application, Stay Safe, to boost contact tracing efforts of the government, especially on businesses in Metro Manila. The app can be downloaded for free without the need for mobile load to function. Business establishments can use the app to avoid long queues, which usually happen when customers fill out forms manually before entering an establishment. Through the app, the user only needs to scan the QR code of the establishment, such as a mall, banks, restaurants, and other public transportation, and their profile will automatically be logged. Stay Safe app users can also be informed faster if one has a close contact who turned out to be positive for COVID-19.
Imagine, habang gamit-gamit mo ang Stay Safe at naglalakad ka sa kalye, so sasabihin ng Stay Safe, uy, may na-detect ka 3 meters to 5 meters confirmed case. So mag-iingat ka, magsa-social distancing ka. Ganun lang kasimple po.
The app also has a health condition reporting through which users can report if they or any family member has symptoms. According to contact tracing czar Mayor Benjamin Magalong, the Stay Safe app can be integrated with existing contact tracing applications used by local government units.
Dahil alam po namin na marami na po local government units ang may kanya-kanya pong digital contact tracing application. Kaya hindi na po kailangan na back to zero sila.
Authorities assure that the app is safe and does not have a hidden surveillance system. According to the August 18 data presented by Mayor Magalong, there are currently 149,000 contact tracers in the country. The contact tracing czar also calls upon local governments and the public to cooperate and participate in the government's contact tracing efforts to prevent the further spread of COVID-19. Vincent Arboleda, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
In other news, the Japanese Coast Guard continues its search and rescue operations for a missing cargo vessel with Filipino seafarers on board off Amami Oshima in Japan. In a statement released by the country's Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, the Panamanian flag cargo vessel was reportedly carrying 43 crew members, 39 of whom are Filipinos. Based on a report, one Filipino has already been rescued by the Japanese authorities. The Philippine Consulate General in Osaka, Japan, is monitoring the situation and continues to coordinate with the Japanese Coast Guard. Local reports say the ship capsized before sinking during the rough weather brought about by Typhoon Mesa. Meanwhile, Malacan lets the Congress decide on passing a bill declaring September 11 as a special non-working holiday and President Ferdinand Edwin Marcos Day in Ilocos Norte. This is the reaction of presidential spokesperson Harry Roque after the House of Representatives approved on its final reading House Bill number 7137. Through 197 affirmative votes. September 11 is the birth anniversary of former President Marcos.
Yan naman po ay katungkulan ng Kongreso, rerespetuhin po kung anong magiging desisyon ng Kongreso. At alam nyo naman po, bago maging batas yan, dapat pumasa sa mababa, kapulungan at saka sa Senado. So rerespetuhin po ng Presidente kung ano maging desisyon ng mga policymakers sa Kongreso.
In other news, the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board, or MTRCB, wants to regulate the content of video on demand and online streaming services such as Netflix. In today's hearing of the Senate Committee on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship, the MTRCB said all motion pictures in the country, regardless of the platform, should pass through and rated by the board.
Streaming services like Netflix are video-on-demand platform, and we have to regulate those platforms. We have to ensure that those materials being shown on those platforms are compliant with the MTRCB law. As long as it is by motion picture content, then MTRCB has jurisdiction over that content regardless kung saan medium mo siya pinalabas. Internet is just a medium. Hindi porke sa internet pinalabas ang isang pelikula, ay therefore wala na siya sa jurisdiction ng MTRCB.
However, the board wants to seek the lawmakers' wisdom first on the matter, especially on the issue of the operations of foreign digital platforms that are based overseas. Senators Sherwin Gatchalian and Amy Marcos recommend to have separate proposed measures tackling digital media and its content. Meanwhile, the Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI, records a significant increase in the number of registrants of online business. According to DTI Secretary Ramon Lopez, from 1,753 online business owners who registered their business names before the country was placed under community quarantine, the number increased to 73,000 during the period of March to August. However, as the number of online businesses grows, the number of online transaction complaints rose as well. From the 2,400 complaints that the DTI Consumer Protection Group received in 2019, the figures ballooned to over 12,000 as of August this year. 8,000 of these complaints were recorded in the months of April to May, when major parts of the country were placed under stricter community quarantine. Lopez confirmed that over 90% of those have been endorsed to various agencies based on the products involved in the complaints.
Hindi lahat ay under DTI. Some would be on the different agencies. So we are fast also in acting on it. The endorsement, let's say, to FDA, pagka mga food and drug related yung products or ineffectiveness, or also to NTC, if it's telco related, and many more. So yung mga produkto po, it depends on the products that are under complaint.
The DTI chief also hopes that the online business application in the country would be fully automated in the next 6 to 12 months. The joint Senate committees will conduct a second hearing soon to dig deeper on the proposed Internet Transactions Act, which aims to protect both the consumers and merchants during online transactions. Representatives from other online platforms, including Facebook and Viber, will be invited in the next hearing. Now, here's a glimpse of what's the weather like in parts of the country. The southwest monsoon or hanging habagat is affecting extreme northern Luzon. State Weather Bureau Pagasa says Metro Manila and the rest of the country will experience partly cloudy to cloudy skies with isolated rain showers due to the southwest monsoon or localized thunderstorms. Meanwhile, Pagasa continues to monitor the weather system outside the Philippine area of responsibility. As of 3 p.m. today, the typhoon with international name Haishen was located at 1,620 kilometers east of extreme northern Luzon with maximum sustained winds of 150 kilometers per hour. Some high-ranking police officials will have new jobs to do. Our police correspondent Leia Ilagan tells us why.
PNP Chief Police General Camilo Cascolan implements a reshuffle of several major posts in the Philippine National Police effective today, September 3. This as several senior police officials retire from the service, including Police General Archie Gamboa, now the country's former top cop. Police Lieutenant General Guillermo Eleazar is promoted as the number 2 man in the PNP or Deputy Chief per administration. Police Lieutenant General Cesar Hawthorne Binag takes a step forward as the new Deputy Chief for Operations. Cascolan also installs Major General Joselito Veracruz as the number 4 man or the Chief Directorial Staff that completes the command group post. Other officials included in the reshuffles are Police Brigadier General Bartolome Bustamante from the Director for Police Community Relations, or DPCR, to the Police Regional Office 5 or Bicol Region as Regional Director. From the Directorate for Operations, Police Major General Emmanuel Licup was transferred to the Directorate for Comptrollership. Police Brigadier General Rolando Hinanay was transferred to the Directorate for Personnel and Records Management or DPCR from the PNP Crime Laboratory. Major General Chiquito Malayo from the Philippine National Police Academy or PNPA gets transferred to the Directorate for Integrated Police Operations in Northern Luzon. From the Directorate for Comptrollership, Police Major General Marnie Marcos will now work in the office of the Chief PNP. Aside from the reshuffle, Cascolan also wants to decongest Camp Crame. He will transfer some officers and men of the Operational Support Unit to other locations.
Kung titingnan mo mabuti, yung mga operational support units nandito sa loob ng Crame, hindi natin alam kung ginagawa nila. Mas marami pa sila dito kaysa sa labas.
The police units to be transferred including the Directorate for Integrated Police Operations or DIPO among others.
Maritime Group, dapat kailangan pumunta sa tubig. Ang HPG sa highways dapat. PNP, ganun din sa Clark. Ang SAP, ilalagay natin sa Baras Rizal.
Cascolan adds it will be a big help for the PNP to have more policemen on the ground.
Kahit nasabihin natin 1:500 na ang kapulisan in ratio with the population, hindi mo maramdaman sa labas kasi hindi sila masyadong nakikita kasi nasa loob sila ng Crame.
Cascolan underscored that he wants a peaceful and safe community for the Filipino people. Leia Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Slain transgender Jennifer Laudis camp stands firm that the Good Conduct Time Allowance or GCTA is not applicable to convicted U.S. Marine Lance Corporal Joseph Scott Pemberton. Dante Amento details why.
Good Conduct Time Allowance or GCTA is a privilege granted to a person deprived of liberty for a reduction of prison term as a reward of good conduct or exemplary behavior. So for Attorney Virginia Suarez, Laudis Legal Counsel, GCTA is not applicable to convicted U.S. Marine Lance Corporal Joseph Scott Pemberton. Pemberton's camp has not presented proof of good conduct for Pemberton's credit, and the court just used the GCTA computation submitted by the Bureau of Corrections for his release.
Simply, ang mga ibinigay lang nila sa korte ay mga computation. I mean, what can you see from the computation? Computation is just a computation. It should not be taken as yun na yun. That computation is equated with good conduct. Dapat may mga records.
Based on the 2017 Uniform Manual on the Time Allowances and Service Sentence, GCTA considerations include active involvement in a rehabilitation program, participation in any authorized work activities, and accomplishment of exemplary deeds with other inmates. But Pemberton had served his sentence solo inside a Camp Aguinaldo special-made facility, and a recommendation from the Management Screening and Evaluation Committee should be done according to Attorney Suarez.
What constitutes good conduct? Ano ba ang mga ginawa nito para sabihin mo na good conduct? The court can easily scrutinize that, but the court did not.
Attorney Suarez also worries that Pemberton would be allowed to escape from jail. She appeals to the public to help monitor the case.
Dahil nagawa na nilang minsan during the time of Daniel Smith na inakas nila si Daniel Smith sa this oras ng gabi. At pwede nila uling gawin yun, kaya natatakot ako.
Yesterday, Laudes Camp filed a motion for reconsideration against Pemberton's release order, and the hearing is on Monday, September 7, by the Olongapo City Regional Trial Court, Branch 74. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice says the Bureau of Corrections will have to wait for the court's resolution on the motion, and Pemberton's release process is on hold. The Bucor also assures to honor the court's processes. It adds that Pemberton is still under Bucor's custody inside a facility at the Camp Aguinaldo. Dante Amento, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
Meanwhile, Malacan says U.S. Marine Lance Corporal Joseph Scott Pemberton should not be released yet from his detention. Our palace correspondent, Rosa Licons, explains why.
Malacanang questions the decision of Olongapo Regional Trial Court, Branch 74, ordering the early release of U.S. Marine Lance Corporal Joseph Scott Pemberton, crediting him Good Conduct Time Allowance or GCTA. According to presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, it is injustice and a bad precedent for a convicted American who has just served his sentence for a few years after killing Filipino transgender Jennifer Laude in 2014.
Very bad po, no? Kasi parang pinapakita na hindi mahalaga ang buhay ng Pilipino. 5 taon lang sa ginitoong hawla ang pwedeng maging parusa. Wag naman po.
The palace reiterates Pemberton should not be released yet from his detention, while according to Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara, the RTC decision is against the recommendation of the Bureau of Corrections or Bucor on Good Conduct Time Allowance. In addition to this, the release process for Pemberton will not commence pending the resolution for the motion for reconsideration of Jennifer Laude's camp, as well as the motion for reconsideration to be filed by the government's prosecutors.
So yung ginawa po ni Judge na siya nang nagdesisyon kung paano siya bibigyan ng credit for good conduct is an instance of judicial overreach.
Meanwhile, Secretary Roque denies Pemberton's lawyers' accusations that he agreed on the release of Pemberton through parole. The palace official was once a counsel for the Laude family. Malacanang says the Duterte administration pushes for the national interest in relation to the Laude case, adding that the president has abrogated the Visiting Forces Agreement of the Philippines with the United States of America. Rosa Licos, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
Meanwhile, the suspect in a recent hit-and-run incident that caused the death of a nurse surrendered to Manila City Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso's office today. The Manila Police District has identified the suspect as Muhammad Ali Sulaiman, who admitted that he was the driver of the black pickup truck which hit Renz Jason Perez on August 23, 2020. Sulaiman will face charges for reckless imprudence resulting in homicide, according to authorities. Mayor Dumagoso appeals to Sulaiman to help the Perez family. And for the news abroad, here's Maria Latosa reporting live from Perth, Australia.
William, the Australian government is preparing an emergency rescue plan in the wake of the country's first recession in 3 decades, with massive tax cuts on the cards. National Treasurer Josh Frydenberg fears it could take years to turn around what he labels the biggest recession since the Great Depression. Economic figures released by the Bureau of Statistics yesterday, with the Australian economy shrinking by an extraordinary 7% in the June quarter, show the catastrophic extent that months of lockdowns have created across the country. This record-breaking collapse comes as consumer spending fell by 12.1% due to continued health concerns, ongoing restrictions, and caution in the face of COVID-19, providing fewer opportunities to spend. There has been unprecedented financial support by the government through the 100 billion Australian dollar JobKeeper wage subsidy scheme and expansion of job seeker payments, which was extended on Tuesday. But this was only enough to lift household incomes, as over 1 million Aussies are out of work, bumping up the unemployment rate to 7.5%, with the Treasury predicting a further 400,000 job losses. In response, Treasurer Frydenberg has hinted that personal income tax cuts worth 20 billion Australian dollars could be brought forward, boost spending in hopes of helping the country cope with a devastating financial catastrophe sparked by coronavirus. This personal income tax cut is expected to form a central part of the government's fiscal response in the upcoming budget. Treasurer Frydenberg said the tax cuts are in 3 different stages, and we are considering the timing of tax cuts, and any announcements would be made in the budget. The first cut was delivered in July 2018, the second planned for 2022, and the last in 2024. If the 2022 tax cut is brought forward to 2020, Australians could expect significant savings and a little more cash in their pockets this year. On the other hand, in consideration of vulnerable Australian citizens stranded overseas due to the impact of travel restrictions and flight arrival caps, the government also announced additional financial support through providing access to emergency loans. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, or DFAT, has created a hardship program that will allow loans intended to cover temporary accommodation and living expenses until Aussies can return. Individuals will be able to borrow up to 2,000 Australian dollars, while families will be able to apply for loans up to 5,000 Australian dollars. Foreign Affairs Minister Marise Payne said that loans may also be available to help vulnerable Australians purchase tickets for commercial flights. Applicants must be successful or must successfully meet strict eligibility criteria and repay the money on arrival in Australia. Such loan access provisions and tax reforms are part of the Australian government's emergency rescue plan to help alleviate the financial distress of its citizens and its economy. Prime Minister Scott Morrison remains optimistic and is upbeat about the prospects of the Australia's financial future. Meanwhile, COVID-19 infections in Europe are back to levels seen in March, when the outbreak began its peak phase there, according to the head of the European Union's Public Health Agency. The virus has not been sleeping over the summer. It did not take vacation. Andrea Aman, head of the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, or ECDC, told EU lawmakers in a regular hearing. She said this week's data showed that across Europe, there were 46 cases per 100,000 people. In March, there were 40 cases per 100,000 and reaching around 70 per 100,000 by the end of April. New cases now mostly involve young people, but she says that reopening of schools does not necessarily pose a risk. Let us now take a closer look at the updated count of coronavirus cases in countries worst hit by the pandemic. The United States of America still has the highest caseload among the 188 countries and territories hit by the pandemic, now at more than 6.11 million. It also has the highest recorded deaths from COVID-19, close to 186,000. while Brazil, according to experts, will reach 4 million within this week. India, on the other hand, is also nearing 4 million. Looking closely, South Africa eased lower in this tally, now only having the 7th most caseload, while Peru and Colombia both inch higher, passing the cumulative cases of South Africa. It can be noted that the Americas contribute the most in the global case count of COVID-19. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has cited that face masks on public transportation is not mandatory in the state. Joining us tonight is our fellow correspondent here in Australia, Early Briones, to tell us why live. Early?
That's right, Marielle. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has cited that face mask on public transportation is not mandatory in the state of New South Wales. She further mentioned that 60% of the commuters are already wearing face masks anyway, and emphasized the complexity of its implementation to New South Wales residents. The residents were left confused when Premier Gladys Berejiklian once said in one of her interviews that people catching public transports need to wear a mask. Recent suspicion of community transmission by public transport arose when 2 COVID-19 infected people went aboard one of Sydney CBD's buses, putting risk of infection to the remaining 11 passengers and the driver. New South Wales Health has successfully contacted 10 out of 11 passengers using their personal Opal train cards registered mobile number. According to New South Wales Transport, the last 14 days data showed there's still a sizable 1.15 million commuters per day that travel within New South Wales. While the New South Wales government is busy with its COVID-19 suppression strategy, Premier Gladys Berejiklian is still very hopeful that the famous year-end fireworks in Sydney will still go ahead in a COVID-safe way. The state of New South Wales currently has 169 active cases and lost 54 lives. Marielle?
Earl, although there is now a very small number of active cases in New South Wales, is the local government still campaigning for a proactive COVID-19 testing?
Yes, Marielle, the local government is very vigilant in monitoring COVID-19 cases. In fact, to date, New South Wales has conducted more than 2.2 million COVID-19 tests and still fully supporting everyone experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 for a free testing. And if there is a need for a translator, the state government also provides such assistance at no cost at all. Marielle?
Okay, thank you, Early Briones, for that report. And those are the reasons behind the news here in Australia and in other parts of the globe. Back to you, William.
Thank you, Maria Latosa, reporting live from Perth, Australia.
Meanwhile, novelist and philanthropist Mackenzie Scott is now the richest woman in the world, according to Bloomberg's Billionaire Index. Scott currently has a net worth of $68 billion. She divorced Amazon founder and CEO Jeff Bezos in 2019. She gained millions of shares of Amazon worth an estimated $38 billion as part of her divorce settlement from Bezos. Scott overtakes French billionaire heiress Francois Bettencourt Meyers. Currently, Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world with a personal worth of $200 billion, followed by Bill Gates. Last week, Tesla CEO Elon Musk became the third richest man, overtaking Facebook CEO and co-founder Mark Zuckerberg. Now it's the other way around. In July, Scott said she donated about $1.7 billion to several causes, including racial equity, LGBT equity, public health, and climate change, among others.
Automobile company General Motors announces it will donate 2 million face masks to Michigan public schools as part of the state of Michigan's MI Mask Aid partnership. GM says it will distribute masks to Michigan's intermediate school districts in coordination with the state of Michigan's Community Service Commission. According to Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, she is grateful for GM's help in protecting kids and educators in the state. Michigan is also looking forward to working with anyone who will help provide masks to vulnerable populations, she said. GM's contribution includes 750,000 child-sized masks for elementary students and 1.25 million adult-sized masks for high school students, faculty, and staff. GM decided to produce face masks in Michigan on March 20 and has donated more than 6 million face masks produced at its Warren, Michigan facility to communities across the state affected by the coronavirus pandemic. GMS also completed its production of 30,000 critical care ventilators in its support to the ongoing fight against COVID-19.
And Indian sand artist Sudarshan Patnaik strikes again. This time, his sand creation is a message to people around the world to wear a mask and properly. Sudarshan mostly creates his sand art at the Puri Beach, also called Chandrabhaga Beach, one of the largest and most popular beaches situated in the village of Chandrabhaga in Puri district. It is considered one of the finest beaches along the eastern coast of India. He also pays tribute to the medical workers who are at the front line of the battle against public enemy number one, COVID-19. Here, he also made a greeting to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for his speedy recovery. And those are the reasons behind the news, September 3, 2020. I am Horlene Delgado.
Because we need to know, we will always ask why. I am William Theo. We serve the people. We give glory to God.